Hi, my name's Bill Mason from Mason & Mason. I'm a real estate attorney in Garden City, New York, and this is Real Estate from an Attorney's Perspective. Today I have my friend Ed Patisso with us, and we're going to talk about commercial short sales and commercial loan modifications. Ed is a seasoned real estate investor, a licensed general contractor, a real estate broker with over 25 years experience in the industry. He is a principal at both Anchor Equities, a real estate investment firm, and Rockaway Development Group. Ed works as a consultant to investors, property owners, and law firms seeking his expertise in distressed real estate transactions and debt resolution strategies. I've been doing business with Ed for over 25 years, and I can tell you one thing for sure, nobody is better at negotiating with a creditor than Ed. So we chose these two topics today because we think that most people don't realize that you can do a short sale or a loan modification on a commercial transaction. It's very popular and everybody seems to know about it for a residential transaction, but we wanted to bring it out to people that it can be done for a commercial transaction as well. We think that there's going to be a lot of commercial loans that are going to go into default. So commercial loans are typically adjustable rate loans as opposed to fixed rate loans that you see mostly on residential transactions. And they have another component to them which requires the borrower to maintain a certain debt service ratio. So there has to be a certain amount of cash flow that's associated with the property for the loan to not be in default. And what's happened is a lot of these loans were taken out years ago when the interest rates were very low, and they're coming up on the reset when the rate is going to go way up, and they're going to either have to refinance or they'll just stay with whatever the reset rate is. But when the rate goes up a couple of points on a multi-million-dollar loan, that really affects the payment and the cash flow, and it's really going to make the potential for a lot of problems with these loans. And you could already see lenders that have a lot of exposure to these commercial types of transactions. New York Community Bank is a perfect example. If you see what's happened with their stock in the last week, these lenders are really suffering from it already. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Ed Patisso. How are you doing today?
Pleasure to be here.
Appreciate you coming on with me today.
Thank you.
And so I figured we'd start out with what's a short sale?
So a short sale is basically when a property is being sold for less than what is owed on the underlying debt, which would include the mortgages, property taxes, any other liens that may be encumbering the property.
Okay. And so what's the advantage of a property owner dealing with a short sale as opposed to just waiting until the bank forecloses and riding it out?
So the last thing you want to do is let a property go to the foreclosure. The biggest benefit for a property owner is debt relief and credit preservation, and certainly release of liability. So just imagine if a bank foreclosed on a property that had $2 million of debt, and that property was eventually foreclosed on and sold at an auction for $1.4 million. The difference between what is owed and what the property sold for would be $600,000. That would be the deficiency. The bank would then have a deficiency judgment against the property owner for at least 10 years.
Right. So I guess the incentive is to get a release of liability, so at least you can walk away clean, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, and so when a short sale doesn't make sense, or maybe the borrower doesn't want to do a short sale, they want to keep the property or figure it out in a different way. Is there any other alternatives to a short sale that you guys deal with?
Yeah, that would be a loan workout. So they can negotiate with their bank to potentially have a loan modification where that would include a reduction of their interest rate, potentially an extension of the life of the loan. So for example, a 20-year mortgage could potentially be extended for 25 or 30. I've even seen as long as 40-year extensions, 40-year amortizations on residential properties. And then also they can take the amount of the arrears that are past due and add them to the principal balance of the loan. So that wouldn't be due until the end of the life of the loan, for example.
Right. And so for a borrower that's coming up on a sale date and they think that maybe they're in a bad spot and they're just going to throw their hands up in the air. Is there any types of things that can be done to put a sale off to make sure that you could have enough time to work out either a short sale or one of these loan modifications?
Sure, so if there's a foreclosure auction
Yep,
imminent.
something scheduled.
So the surefire way of canceling a foreclosure auction would be immediately to file a bankruptcy.
Right. So
That would provide immediate relief and an automatic stay.
Right, and I guess also I've seen you have the attorney go into court, file an order to show cause if you have a contract of sale.
Yeah.
Getting a judge just to put it off if maybe some person can't do a bankruptcy or
Sure.
or if they don't want to
Yeah.
do a bankruptcy.
So
Okay.
now we're talking about foreclosure defense. File an order to show cause, and that would provide immediate relief. And this is something that needs to be done in advance of an actual auction date. You can't wait until the last minute, right? So
But
a lot
people
of
do. We both know that.
People do. That's usually when I get the
Yeah.
phone calls, right? When
Sure,
all else fails.
sure.
But you want to be, the first thing that you really want to do is consult with an expert and have your circumstances evaluated so that you understand what the options are and so that you can prepare well in advance. But certainly, filing an order to show cause would provide immediate relief if you do it in advance enough of the auction date.
Yeah, or the bankruptcy, of course.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, so that-
bankruptcies can be done, 24
Hours
hours before the
beforehand.
auction.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you see that a lot. If so many of the people, they call you the week of, or
Right.
I know I get that all the time. But if you're at that point, you still have the opportunity to work something out. And
Yeah.
so don't just think, no, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
Bankruptcy or order to show cause works great.
It's
Right?
almost never too late, right? But you really don't want to call the day after the
Yeah.
foreclosure auction.
Yeah.
That's when it's too
That's a
late.
problem.
That's a problem.
Sure. And so why would a bank have any incentive to work with you on a loan modification or a short sale?
Lenders are just not in the business of property management. They don't want to own the real estate. They're in the lending business. So the last thing they want to do is keep a defaulted mortgage on their books, and especially for an extended period of time. The more loan defaults that a lender would have on their portfolio of loans, the more of a credit risk that bank would be.
So once somebody calls you and says, hey, I need to work on a loan modification, or hey, I want to, think about doing a short sale, right? Like, how do you approach it? Like, what are you telling the people to do?
So the first thing we do is we do a thorough evaluation of their personal finances. We want to understand what led to the default, and we want to understand what their goals are. Then we do a thorough evaluation of the property and an evaluation of the condition of the property, and then we make contact with their bank.
Right. I had seen on a lot of them, you get an engineer's inspection so that you could have a really good
Very
breakdown of what's
important.
going on and point
Yeah.
out the defects.
The bank is going to order their own appraisal. So what we do is before the bank actually has their appraisal inspection is we present to the bank and we present to the appraiser a New York State licensed engineer's inspection, which is very important because now that report becomes a disclosure of any latent and material defects. The appraiser is now legally obligated to consider what is in that engineer's inspection.
Yeah, and I've seen that to be very effective in some of the cases we've had together in the past.
Yeah, this is what makes all the difference, and I think this is where most of these workouts or short sales fail is because they're not presented right the first time. They raise more questions than they do answers.
I've had them come back into my office filled out by the borrowers, and they're not really put together completely. And I see when you put them together, it's done in a real tight type of way. So why don't you speak to that a little?
Sure. So the presentation, 90% of it is in the presentation. This is where most property owners will fail. If they fill out the financial information themselves without that being reviewed by an expert before it's submitted to the bank, it could lead to immediate failure. So I think one of the greatest examples that we can give is the 3 doctors that
Right.
you had recently referred to me. And they tried to negotiate with the lender about a year ago, right, prior to my involvement. The bank rejected their offer because they were insisting that the property was worth way more than what the contract price was. So in this particular case, we had a contract already in place for $1.9 million. When I contacted the asset manager at the bank, she said, well, the property is worth at least $300,000 more than that. And I said, okay, great. Well, go ahead, send me the appraisal. Let's take a look. Oh, no, we don't do that. We don't release the appraisals. Then it became, a 6-week battle between me and their attorney about their legal obligations for releasing the valuation. From my view, they were negotiating in bad faith. They were rejecting the property owner's short sale based on what they determined was a valuation that they were not sharing with us, right? So after they conceded that that appraisal was probably old and they would need to perform a new appraisal, they then said, well, why don't you go ahead and send us the personal financial statements for the borrowers. Now, this was an exercise that took several weeks, and it was, we joke with the doctors. They actually said that, we're the doctors and you're the one giving us a prostate exam. It was a very involved process where we looked at all of their income and expenses, not just for the building, but their own personal financial circumstances. And then even beyond that, we went into their regular expenses that they never even considered, just basic living expenses. What I was able to determine by doing this thorough evaluation was the fact that one of the 3 doctors was actually insolvent. Now, this was a very key point in my negotiation with the lender. Establishing that one doctor whose salary was $400,000 a year was actually insolvent. Now that he was insolvent, he's qualified to file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. That would extend the foreclosure for an indefinite period. This could go on for a year, 2 years, etc. The other important point, what was new actually, was that the tenants that were in the building were now defaulted on their rent.
And it was Brooklyn.
And it was Brooklyn.
Yep.
So now,
For those who don't know, Brooklyn, it could be a year or 2 to get somebody out as well, right?
yeah, we just finished
The worst.
an eviction for non-payment in New York City, and it took 2 years to
Yep.
get the tenants out. So after having conversations with the attorney and having him understand these particular circumstances, this effectively became leverage in the negotiation. Enough leverage where the lender realizes that A, the property is not worth as much, right, unless they want to perform another appraisal, and then especially because we now have a circumstance where this foreclosure could drag out for another year or 2 because one of the debtors can qualify for a bankruptcy. And we also have a situation where if the bank forecloses on the property after that period, now they're left with a property with squatters, effectively, 4 tenants that are not paying rent. Good luck in landlord tenant court. And the attorney knew this. When he realized what new circumstance he was finding his client in, they decided not even to perform another appraisal. They agreed to settle the debt. The difference in what the savings were for the property owners was $800,000, right? Because we had property taxes that were in default, that were in excess of $350,000. We had 2 mortgages, and we had, the property's debt, and then of course transfer taxes. So the property is now in contract and scheduled for a closing for a sale of $1.9 million.
This week, yes. And that was amazing, and that's just one of the many examples you've and I've had over the last 20 years.
Sure.
It's been amazing.
Yeah.